The incredible story of Mariusz Pudzianowski, one of the strongest men in history. What does it really mean to be the strongest man in the world? Is it about lifting the heaviest weight? Is it about having the biggest muscles? Or is true strength something much more complicated? Because in the world of elite strongman competition, raw power is only the beginning. The athletes who reach the highest level are not simply strong. They must be powerful, fast, explosive, technically skilled, mentally tough, and capable of continuing when their bodies are begging them to stop. They must lift enormous weights, carry objects that appear impossible to move, fuel vehicles, press massive loads above their heads, race against other giants, and sometimes perform one brutal event after another with almost no time to recover. At the end of the competition, the winner is not necessarily the person who can perform the biggest single lift. The winner is the athlete who can survive everything. For many years, one man seemed to do exactly that better than almost anyone else. His name was Mariusz Pudzianowski. But the world would come to know him by a name that perfectly described his style of competition: the Dominator. He was not just one of the strongest men in the world. He became one of the most dominant competitors the sport had ever seen. 5 times, he would win the world's strongest man title. He would repeatedly defeat some of the most powerful athletes on earth. And he would change the way people thought about what a strong man could be. Because Mariusz Pudzianowski was not simply massive. He was fast, he was explosive, he was incredibly conditioned, and when the competition began, he often looked less like a traditional strongman and more like a human machine designed for speed and power. But his journey to the top did not begin in front of thousands of spectators. It began with a simple challenge, a young boy, a question, and the desire to become stronger. Beginning of the journey. Mariusz Pudzianowski was born in Poland in 1977. At the time, there was no reason to believe that he would one day become one of the most famous strength athletes in the world. Like every future champion, he began as an ordinary young person. But during his childhood, he developed an interest in physical strength. When he was around 13 years old, an experience helped spark his determination to train. A school friend lifted him over his head and held him there for several minutes. For most people, that might have been nothing more than a strange moment. For young Mariusz, it became a challenge. He wanted to understand why someone else could perform a feat that he could not. And instead of accepting the difference, he decided to work on himself. That decision was important, because almost every great athlete begins with a moment when they recognize a weakness. The difference is what happens next. Some people accept the limitation, others become curious. They ask questions: why can he do that? Why can't I? What would happen if I trained? How much stronger could I become? For Pudzianowski, those questions became the beginning of a lifelong journey. He started strength training at a very young age. At first, he was not chasing world records. He was not preparing for the world's strongest man competition. He was simply developing his body and discovering what it was capable of doing. But the habits formed during those early years would eventually become the foundation of his career: training consistently, living beyond comfort, learning how the body works, and refusing to remain satisfied with the current level of performance. This is one of the most important lessons in the story of Mariusz Pudzianowski. Greatness usually does not begin with a world championship. It begins with small improvements that nobody notices. One more repetition, one more difficult workout, one more day of discipline. The world eventually sees the result. But the result is built during the years when nobody is watching. More than just a strongman. One reason Pudzianowski became so successful was that his athletic background was not limited to one type of training. He developed himself as a complete athlete. This was extremely important because strongman competition demands much more than the ability to lift a heavy object. Imagine 2 athletes. One can lift an enormous weight once, the other can lift a very heavy weight, carry it quickly, recover, and then perform another difficult event. In a competition, the second athlete may be more successful. This is because strongman is not simply about maximum strength. It is a combination of many physical qualities: maximum strength, explosive power, grip strength, endurance, balance, coordination, technique, and mental toughness. Pudzianowski developed many of these qualities throughout his career. His physique was powerful, but he also worked to remain athletic. This created a combination that was extremely difficult for competitors to deal with. He could produce tremendous force, but he could also move quickly. He could perform heavy events, but he could also maintain a high level of conditioning. And that combination became one of his greatest advantages. Many athletes are exceptional in one area. Some are incredible lifters. Some are outstanding at carrying events. Some are exceptionally powerful in static exercises. But the world's strongest man competition demands consistency across many different challenges. A competitor who dominates one event but performs poorly in several others may still lose the entire competition. Pudzianowski understood this. He did not build himself around one single skill. He became a complete competitor. And that would eventually make him incredibly difficult to defeat. Team The World of Strongman in 1999. Pudzianowski began competing in strongman events. The sport was already filled with powerful athletes. These were men capable of feats that seemed almost impossible. They could lift weights that would be beyond the ability of most people. They could carry enormous objects. They could pull trucks and other heavy vehicles. They could press huge loads above their heads. But strongman competition was not only about being physically powerful. It was also about dealing with pressure. A competitor might spend months preparing for a competition. Then everything could depend on one event. A mistake could cost valuable points. A bad grip could destroy a performance. A small technical error could allow another athlete to take the lead. And because the competitors were so closely matched, even a few seconds could make a difference. In 2000, Pudzianowski competed at the World's Strongest Man competition for the first time. He finished fourth. That result was remarkable. The World's Strongest Man competition is not a normal sporting event. The athletes competing there are already among the strongest people in the world. For a newcomer to reach fourth place was a powerful statement. It suggested that Pudzianowski had something special. He was not simply strong enough to participate. He was already capable of competing near the top. The next question was obvious. Could he win? The first championship in 2002, Mariusz Pudzianowski answered that question. He won the World's Strongest Man title. For the first time, he stood at the top of the most prestigious competition in the sport. This was the moment when a talented competitor became a champion. But becoming champion is one thing, remaining champion is another. The following year, Pudzianowski returned to defend his title, and he won again, back-to-back World's Strongest Man championships. At this point, it became clear that his first victory had not been a coincidence. He was not simply an athlete who had experienced one perfect competition. He was becoming a dominant force. The difference between a great athlete and a dominant athlete is consistency. A great athlete can win. A dominant athlete continues to win even after everyone begins preparing specifically to defeat them. Once Pudzianowski became champion, every competitor knew what they were facing. They knew his strengths, they knew his speed, they knew his style. And they wanted to take the title from him, but he continued to perform. This is where the mental side of elite sport becomes important. The first time an athlete competes, there may be little pressure, nobody expects them to win. But after victory, everything changes. People expect the champion to continue winning. The athlete is no longer chasing the title. The title is now chasing them. Every performance is judged against their previous success. Every mistake receives more attention, every defeat becomes a major story. Pudzianowski had now entered that world. He was no longer an unknown competitor. He was the man everyone wanted to beat. Tess Tibaka champion story is never complete without adversity. In 2004, Pudzianowski experienced a major setback connected to the World's Strongest Man competition. He originally finished third. But the result was later changed after a disqualification related to the competition's health policy. For an athlete who had already won the title twice, this was a difficult moment. But setbacks are important because they reveal the character of an athlete. Victory shows what someone can do when everything goes well. Failure shows how they respond when it does not. Some competitors lose confidence after a setback. Some become frustrated. Some never return to the same level. But Pudzianowski came back. In 2005, he won the World's Strongest Man title again. This was his third championship. The victory was more than another trophy. It was a response. He had been pushed away from the top. But he returned. And he reclaimed it. This is one of the reasons his story remains so powerful. The journey of a champion is not a straight line. There are victories. There are disappointments. There are moments of doubt. There are moments when the future is uncertain. But the greatest athletes are not defined by the absence of failure. They are defined by their response to it. Pudzianowski responded by returning to the top. Dopshu was different to understand Pudzianowski's dominance. We have to understand what made him different from many other strongman athletes.